Hey guys, tonight we travel to a small Persian village where the sky doesn't just tell time, it issues warnings. The kind of warnings only locals recognize, where a change in light isn't poetic, it's tactical. You're outside idly petting a goat that may or may not belong to anyone in particular, when the color of the sky tilts ever so slightly from cheerful blue to a dry, muted ochre. No one says sandstorm at first. That would be rude, superstitious. You don't name the storm, you watch for it. The breeze picks up, but it's warm, and it doesn't cool your sweat. Instead, it's like the breath of a kiln, opening slightly dry and thick. A scrap of cloth tumbles past your feet like it's looking for a new home. Chickens run in that frantic diagonal way they do when something bigger than them moves invisibly through the world. A hunched woman watering the basil mutters something under her breath, something that sounds halfway between a prayer and a complaint. That's when you know the storm is real. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint up at the sky. It's not dust yet, more like haze. But the old men at the tea stall have already gone quiet, staring out past the rooftops like they're watching for ghosts. One of them stands slowly, stretches, and begins folding up his worn rug without a word. That's all the signal you need. You head home. You hurry, but not too fast. Running would admit it's serious. You pass the village well, and the rope's been tied up tight already. A boy, barefoot, dust-streaked eyes alert, runs ahead of you, knocking on doors and shouting warnings. He's not making up his own lines. He's reciting them from memory. This happens often enough for children to practice the protocol like a desert fire drill. Mainstream fact: Persian villages in the arid plateaus of Yazd, Kerman, and Khuzestan had oral traditions and generational systems of storm alerts, often using children as runners to pass messages quickly through tight alleyways, especially in communities too remote for bells or formal sirens. You reach your door. It's a thick, slightly warped slab of wood, held together by metal studs, half ancient, half improvised repairs. You slide the heavy bolt across and begin preparing the house like your life depends on it. Because it sort of does. Quirky tidbit: some villagers would sprinkle crushed saffron or ground henna outside their thresholds to confuse the wind of folk belief that the storm spirit couldn't cross a line too beautiful or fragrant. Skeptical, sure, but you still do it. You light a lantern. Not for light, it's midday, but the shadows feel stronger now, and there's comfort in flame. You move with purpose. Secure the shutters, close the wall, vents cover the basket of dates, hide the sugar bowl. Historians still argue whether sandstorms were truly more intense in certain regions during the medieval period, or if collective memory simply exaggerated events through oral storytelling. One chronicler from the 11th century wrote of a storm that carried away a camel and returned a rooster. But no archaeological evidence supports poultry teleportation. Still, your neighbors treat this one like it's serious. You peek out through a knothole in the wall. The light has gone full bronze now, a color you only ever see on coins or fire. A sound starts soft at first, like dry rice pouring slowly into a metal basin. It builds into a hiss. You shut the knothole. No more watching. The storm is arriving. The boy's voice fades into the wind, replaced now by the unmistakable sound of rope slapping against shutters and wooden latches being pulled tight. You press your back to the door and listen. Not for footsteps, not for voices, but for pressure. That heavy, breathless pause the air takes right before it collapses into chaos. You move quickly to the windows, 3 of them in your small home, all slightly warped with frames that argue with the shutters every time you try to close them. You curse a little under your breath, nothing too scandalous, just enough to let the wood know you're not in the mood. The first shutter closes with a dull thunk. You loop the rope around the inner peg, an old walnut root shaped like a hook, and pull until the line creaks. 2 more to go. You reach the back window, the one near the bread oven, and this one resists you. A splinter catches your sleeve. A wasp, confused by the sudden change in air pressure, buzzes angrily in the corner like it's demanding answers from the universe. You swat it gently away, close the shutter, and tie it down. The last window faces the courtyard. You hesitate. Out there, the 2 goats still stand wide-eyed, their ears twitching like flags in reverse. The chickens have vanished, probably under the clay bench. But the camels in the distance, they're already being led inside by your neighbor Hakim, who's yelling something that involves your name and the word lazy. You close the final shutter. Mainstream fact. In pre-modern Persian villages, homes were often built with thick mud brick walls and small elevated windows to protect against both heat and dust. Shutters weren't merely wooden flaps. They were functional storm armor, sometimes lined with layers of wool, felt, or oiled parchment to block fine sand particles. You pull down the heavy curtain inside each window, a woven mashup of goat hair and cotton dyed with pomegranate rind. It smells like age smoke and dignity. Then come the ropes. You're not just closing windows, you're fortifying. You loop and knot each curtain tie like a sailor who's read too many epic poems. You even double-check the knots because sand has a way of finding whatever you forget. Fringe tidbit. Some desert dwellers believe that tying 7 knots per shutter would confuse the wind spirits who, legend has it, can only pass through doors that open in 7 clean turns. You aren't sure whether it's true, but it's better than explaining to your aunt why the date jar is full of sand again. Your younger cousin, breathless and slightly dramatic, bursts through the back entrance and shouts, "The sun's gone." You don't need to check, you can feel it. the color of the light inside your home changes, even though there are no windows open. It goes from gold to beige to something you'd call gray toast, if you were feeling poetic and hungry at the same time. You light 2 more oil lamps, strategically placed high on shelves, to minimize fire risk if anything collapses, and tighten the wooden latches. Then the wind hits, not just outside. The walls seem to take it personally. There's a strange moment when the entire house exhales a loud creak from the roof beam, a puff of dust from a forgotten corner, the sudden dancing of your hanging spoon rack like they're trying out for a kitchen ballet. Historians still argue whether storm shutters in Persian homes were primarily architectural or symbolic. Some believe they were inherited customs from earlier Mesopotamian or Zoroastrian rituals. Others argue it was pure practicality dressed in poetic ritual. Either way, you're not taking chances. You listen now, seated on a thick cushion, stuffed with straw and faded regrets. The wind hisses past every crevice in the wall, testing for entry. You place your hand near the base of the main door and feel it a breath thin as thread, slipping through like a rumor. You grab an old saddle blanket, heavier than your conscience during tax season, and roll it against the bottom of the door. Not elegant, but effective. The house is now sealed. Well, as sealed as a home made of dirt and hope can be. In the distance, you hear a camel bellow, a long, throaty, profoundly offended noise, something between a trumpet and a slow-motion yawn. It's comforting, somehow. The storm hasn't blown the camels away yet. That's a win. You sit back. The wind howls. The shutters rattle. But inside, it's quiet. Not peaceful, but held together. Tight, like the air, right before the first drumbeat, in a song that doesn't yet have a melody. You close your eyes and count the seconds between gusts, and then it begins. The sand doesn't knock. It infiltrates. At first, it's just sound wind laced with something sharper, like dry leaves being shredded underfoot. But this sound isn't just outside. It's in the roof beams, the shutters, the corners of your mind that remember stories told by lantern light about entire caravans swallowed by storms so fast they didn't even have time to curse. Then comes the pressure, steady, insistent, as if the wind has turned to stone and is trying to lean through your house. The walls don't crumble, but they hum, deep, low, like an old man humming under his breath while he sharpens a blade. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders, not for warmth, it's still hot, but for weight, for the illusion of defense. The lamp flickers. You move to protect it with your hand, but the flame holds steady. That's a good sign. Your cousin, now fully committed to drama, insists that the storm is as big as the one that ate Uncle Farhad's wedding. You resist the urge to ask how a storm can eat a wedding, but you know what she means. That particular storm had scattered tables, buried a whole roast lamb, and sent Aunt Layla's veil into the next village. Mainstream fact, medieval Persian weddings particularly in rural areas, often took place in open courtyards or flat-roofed terraces. Sudden sandstorms were not just a nuisance, they could completely derail ceremonies, ruin days of food preparation, and force emergency shelter in nearby buildings, sometimes leading to unexpected overnight communal stays. The wind is steady now, less like a gust and more like a siege. Every few seconds, a grain of sand finds its way through, no matter how carefully you sealed the room. It glitters slightly in the lamplight before settling onto the woven mat. You make a game of it, count the grains that sneak in. 10, 11, 12. You lose count at 17, not because there are too many, but because the lamp dims for real this time. You tap the glass, adjust the wick. The flame steadies but stays lower. The air's thinning, not in oxygen, but in clarity. Every breath tastes like yesterday's dirt. A knock at the door. You freeze, because that's not part of the plan. No one goes out in this weather. No one arrives during it. Yet someone knocks once, then twice, deliberate and calm. You stand slowly, not frightened exactly, but alert in a way that feels ancestral. You reach the door and lean close, not opening, just pressing your ear to the wood. Another knock, so soft it could be imagined. Then a voice, muffled, apologetic. "It's me, Hakim. I forgot to tie down the second water jug." You sigh. Of course it's Hakim, the same neighbor who once forgot his own shoes at the mosque. You crack the door open slightly. A rush of wind pushes against it like a beast trying to squeeze in on the heels of a man. You let Hakim in, slam the door shut, and drop the saddle blanket back in place. He's covered in sand. Not dust, sand. Coarse red clinging to every wrinkle and fold in his clothing. His eyebrows are white with it. He looks like a baked statue of himself. Fringe tidbit. In some parts of Kerman province, villagers would rub olive oil mixed with crushed walnut shells onto exposed skin before a sandstorm, believing it created a barrier that repelled fine dust. Whether it worked is unclear, but it certainly made post-storm cleaning easier, especially if you had goats willing to help. Hakim collapses onto a cushion and starts brushing himself off. You hand him a damp cloth. He nods, thanks, and mutters about his poor camels, who are now inside the grain shed and probably mocking him in camel speak. The wind outside changes tone. It's no longer constant. It pulses. Short bursts each, like a wave breaking against a ship hull. The house creaks with each impact, and you're suddenly aware of every crack in every brick. The cousin lights a second lamp, not for more light, just for symmetry. Two flames are less lonely than one. You all sit in silence now, listening. Then Hakim starts to talk, not in a dramatic way, but in that particular tone older Persian men use when they're about to unroll a memory like a rug. "There was a storm once," he says, "back when my father still walked straight. We thought it would last a day. It lasted 3. By the end, we had to boil tea with brick dust and pretend it was saffron." You chuckle. Your cousin rolls her eyes. She's heard this one before. but you let him talk. Because when the world outside is being peeled apart by the wind, sometimes the best defense is a shared story, inside thick walls. You lean back. The house moans, but it holds, and you start counting sand grains again. You wake from a doze you didn't realize you'd slipped into. The room hasn't changed much, still dim, still thick with lamplit shadow and the gentle scratch of sand against the shutters. But your body knows time has passed. Your back aches from the awkward angle, and your shawl has slipped down your arms, pooling like a lazy cat around your waist. Hakim is snoring loudly. He's tilted backward against the cushion pile like a man who's been punched in the chest by drowsiness. His head droops to one side, and a fine dusting of sand has settled on the tip of his nose. You resist the urge to laugh. Your cousin is curled like a vine in the corner, her knees tucked to her chest, breathing steady. Even in sleep, she holds a posture of exaggerated drama, like she's in the third act of a play no one's watching. The storm has not let up. If anything, it's deepened, gone from a sharp, skittering gust to a deep, chest-rattling growl. The wind now sounds older, less angry, and more insistent, as if it's no longer trying to break in, but simply reminding you who's in charge. You stand careful not to wake anyone, and make your way to the kitchen alcove. You're thirsty, but the water jug has been moved, hidden away to prevent contamination. You find it under a blanket beside the clay oven and pour a little into a copper cup. The water tastes of clay and distant mint, faintly sweet and grounding. It settles your nerves like a gentle hand on your shoulder. Mainstream fact: during sandstorms, Persian villagers often wrap their food and water containers in layers of cloth, or place them in clay vessels with sealed lids to avoid contamination. Fine dust could infiltrate even small openings, so homes relied on dense weaving and placement strategy, water near the floor, food on high shelves to mitigate damage. You sit back down now, wide awake. The silence inside is its own weather, quiet, but not still. The house adjusts to every gust, like a ship adjusts to waves. The walls breathe. The beams groan. It's not fear, it's familiarity. This isn't the first storm, and it won't be the last. Outside, something creaks. Not your house, something further away. A distant hinge or a gate left ajar. You imagine the village square, empty, erased. The well half buried in drifting sand. The prayer flags strung between rooftops, now tangled and humming like harp strings. Fringe tidbit: in some Persian villages, wind chimes weren't just decorative. Certain shapes, especially copper crescents and pomegranate-carved wood, were believed to confuse jinn and desert spirits during storms, keeping them from entering homes through unseen doorways. You glance at the one hanging above your hearth, a small iron shape vaguely resembling a crescent moon and a serpent entwined. It barely moves now, just a faint sway, but it sings a soft metallic song that seems older than the walls themselves. You pull out a small clay tablet from under the cushion, something you've used to mark time before. Etched into it are shallow grooves, tally marks of past storms. You run your finger across the lines. 1, 2, 3, 11. You add another. 12. Your house has survived 12 storms since you first took ownership of it. Some worse than this. Some louder. Some quieter, but crueler. The kind that sweep in when no one expects and take a child's goat or a roof tile you liked. But the house still stands. You suddenly remember the bread. Before the storm hit, you'd left a small batch of dough under a damp cloth near the fire. It was meant for flatbread, something quick and basic for the evening meal. You hurry to check, lifting the cloth gently. It's risen, not perfectly, but enough. You smile. Even in this noise, this breathless world of grit and wind, the yeast did its quiet work. You stoke the embers in the oven with a twist of dry twigs, careful not to open the fire flap too wide. The flame responds, flickering like it's just remembered it has something to do. Mainstream fact. Flatbread was a staple in Persian homes and could be made quickly, even during storms. The dough was often left to rise near the oven's residual heat, then slapped onto the inner walls of a tandoor or baked on flat clay griddles. You press the dough into 2 rounds and cook them carefully. The smell is instant, toasty, warm, ancient. It fills the small house like a memory you didn't know you had. Hakim stirs, blinks, says nothing, just sniffs the air and nods in approval. Your cousin opens one eye and mutters, "Is it morning?" You smile. No, just bread. She grunts and turns over. You break the bread into pieces and hand one to Hakim, who chews it silently, reverently. A ritual older than fear. Outside the wind grows, but inside you chew, you breathe, you endure. And you add another tally mark in your heart. You move toward the back of the house where the courtyard lies just beyond a heavy wooden door, now barred with 2 thick beams. On a normal day, this space would be alive with small chores, drying laundry, feeding hens, scraping dried herbs into cloth bags. But tonight, behind those doors, the wind howls like it has teeth, and it scratches like it wants in. The camels are in there. You can hear them. One of them grunts, low and guttural, followed by the shuffle of hooves on packed dirt. The noise is surprisingly delicate for such large creatures, like someone stirring heavy soup with a wooden spoon. You lift the latch and peer through a small cutout window. The camels are huddled near the wall, their long necks swaying like reeds, their eyes wrapped in old scarves and rags tied gently but firmly. A trick passed down from generation to generation. Keep the dust out of the eyes, or the beasts panic, and panic leads to chaos. Mainstream fact. In desert regions of Persia, camels were considered both essential and extremely vulnerable during sandstorms. Villagers often led them into enclosed courtyards or shared central barns and wrapped their heads in old cloth to protect their eyes and noses. A panicked camel could easily injure itself or destroy parts of the shelter. You reach through the window and toss a few date seeds into their trough. Not that they'll eat much tonight, the storm makes everything nervous. Even chewing feels like defiance. Fringe tidbit. Some believe that feeding camels date pits during sandstorms gave them a better memory of roots watering holes even travelers. The story goes that if you treat a camel kindly during a storm, it will never forget the way home. You sit down by the door and rest your head against the wood. It vibrates faintly with every gust like a drum playing a song too slow to dance to. From here, you can hear the storm breathing. Inhale, exhale, groan, whisper. Hakim walks over and hands you a folded scarf, embroidered at the edges, stiff from repeated washing. You accept it wordlessly and tie it around your mouth and nose, not because you're about to go out, but because old habits are like heirlooms. Sometimes you wear them without thinking. Your cousin sits nearby, rubbing oil into her hands. Sesame oil, scented faintly with fig and rose. The camels are smart, she murmurs. They sit, they wait. Better than most people. You glance at her. We're sitting too. She grins, but not as gracefully. You both laugh, and the moment lightens just a bit. There's a thump from the other side of the wall, not the camels. Something sharper, a sound like a ceramic pot falling and cracking in two. You freeze. Your cousin whispers, maybe the neighbor's water jar fell. Hakim raises a brow. Or maybe it's a djinn. You roll your eyes, but secretly you tighten the scarf around your face. In storms like this, stories become plausible, and fear starts wearing the costume of folklore. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether belief in desert spirits was a psychological coping mechanism or a genuine spiritual framework. Some say they gave villagers a way to personalize and communicate with the otherwise impersonal violence of nature, while others claim the beliefs stem from older Zoroastrian and pre-Islamic cosmologies. Whatever the truth, you've heard the stories since you were small of creatures made of wind and sand, invisible to most, but very real to those who dared to look too long into the storm. You knock softly on the wooden beam, 3 times a little rhythm your grandmother once showed you. Not a superstition, she'd said, just a reminder that the house listens and the walls protect. You sit for a while, the storm continuing its siege and the camels humming now. Yes, humming deep, soft sounds from within their throats. Not quite music, more like a lullaby for beasts. Your cousin dozes again. Hakim starts sketching shapes in the sand scattered across the floor tiles. He makes a spiral, then a line, then a symbol you can't quite place. Protection seal, he says. You made it up. Most of them are made up. Fair enough. You rest your head back and stare at the ceiling, watching the flicker of lamplight dance across old wooden beams. The play of light is mesmerizing, like watching shadows have slow conversations. One camel sneezes loudly. Everyone jumps, and then silence. Not outside, the storm is still there, of course, but inside, a long, deep hush. The camels go still. No more grunting, no more shifting. It's like the whole courtyard has held its breath. And you hold yours too, just for a second. Then you breathe out. Still safe, still dry, still together. The well is silent. You step gingerly into the center of the courtyard, past the resting camels and their twitching ears. Even though the outer doors remain sealed, the roof above is open in the middle, innocuous like a small eye to the sky. That eye is tightly shut now, with stretched cloth and wet felt, but a fine sift of dust still manages to whisper through the seams. It lands on your shoulders, soft as old flour. The village well sits at the far edge of the yard. In the daylight, it's the pulse of the housewomen drawing water in bronze pails, children leaning over the edge to shout and hear their echoes. But tonight, it's hidden beneath a thick limestone slab, sealed down with sticky brown clay smeared around the rim. You crouch beside it and run your hand along the edge. The clay is still damp. The seal is holding. That's good. Mainstream fact. In desert regions of Persia, wells were sealed before a storm, not just to preserve water purity, but to prevent sand from infiltrating the shaft. Fine dust could ruin the mechanism, make the water taste like grit, and block the flow for days. Many households had specialized lids, sometimes weighed down with stones or plastered with wet mud. Hakim joins you, holding a wooden ladle. "You think it's deep enough?" he asks. "Of course it's deep enough," you say, though you don't sound fully convinced. Truth is, no one really knows how deep it goes. The well predates your grandfather, maybe even your grandfather's grandfather. The village historian, who is mostly just a man with the best memory and the loudest voice, once claimed the well was blessed by a prophet and dug by jinn with spoons of fire. That part, at least, sounds like an exaggeration. Hakim taps the lid with his knuckles. "Still warm," he mutters. "Sand's pressing down hard." You nod. That's another sign. The air pressure shifts before the real storm arrives. Water levels might rise just a hair. It's happened before. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers claimed that water from a sealed storm well had healing properties. Women would collect a ladleful before dawn the next morning and wash their faces with it to prevent bad dreams and attract good marriage proposals. One woman swore it gave her son clearer skin and better luck at board games. You sit down cross-legged beside the well and listen, not to the storm, to what's beneath. There's something oddly peaceful about the muffled hush of water sleeping in its stone chamber, protected by mud and ritual. Above you, the cloth oculus flutters slightly. A strand of fringe comes loose and dances like a snake. A gust of wind tests the seams, groaning like a tired animal. The house responds with a low creak. Your cousin pokes her head out the inner door. "We need more candles." You nod and head inside. In the main room, the table has been pushed against the wall to make space. 3 children sleep in a pile, limbs sprawled like spilled laundry. A cat purrs loudly near the hearth, eyes slitted in feline boredom. You kneel by the trunk and lift the lid. Inside, clay candle holders, extra ropes, strips of linen, a coil of dried mint, 2 old dice carved from walnut, and 7 short beeswax candles that smell faintly of burnt honey. You take 3. As you close the trunk, your eyes fall on a drawing. It's charcoal on thin parchment, faded, wrinkled, and oddly sweet. A sketch of the house, the well, and 4 stick figures, 2 tall, 2 small. No names, but you know who it's meant to be. Your parents used to joke that even storms bowed when your mother walked by. You light a candle from the hearth, shielding the flame with your hand. The shadows retreat, just a little replaced with flickering gold. You return to the courtyard, setting 1 candle near the well, 1 by the camels, and 1 under the oculus, where the felt canopy threatens to flap loose. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Persian storm rituals like sealing the well with clay or lighting protective circles of candles were practical or symbolic. Some say they evolved from early desert survival techniques, while others believe they were spiritual gestures meant to anchor the soul of the home during times of atmospheric chaos. You don't argue either way. All you know is that without the candles, the courtyard feels hollow. With them, it breathes. You sit again by the well and let your back rest against the stone. The candlelight throws your shadow across the lid, slender, uncertain, but there. In the distance, a high whine pierces the air, one of the shingles giving way. It'll be fixed later. For now, it's just part of the symphony. A camel coughs. Your cousin calls from inside, asking if you remembered the mint. You didn't. But the well is sealed, the candles are lit, and the water beneath your feet sleeps undisturbed. It's enough for now. You lean your head back against the cool stone rim of the sealed well and watch the fabric ceiling pulse like a lung. Outside, the wind scrapes harder now, its voice rising from hiss to howl like it's trying to speak, but the words keep getting caught in its throat. You imagine the storm as a creature pacing just beyond the walls, circling, sniffing for weakness. The door creaks open again. It's grandmother, not in her usual shawls and slippers, but in her long festival robe, the embroidered one, with tiny glass beads that catch the candlelight like dewdrops. You blink. You're dressed for no ruse. She snorts. And you're dressed like a goose. Come inside. It's time. Time, she beckons with one bent finger. You stand and follow her into the large central room. All the furniture's been pushed to the walls. In the center, a rug has been rolled aside to reveal bare, packed earth. A circle of flat stones sits in the dirt, 12 in all, forming a rough clock. Sit, she says. You sit. Mainstream fact. In some Persian villages especially, before the 13th century, families performed storm vigils during sandstorms, part ceremony, part game, part magical insurance policy. The tradition varied from region to region, but it typically involved staying awake all night and holding the storm in place by telling stories, singing lullabies, or even insulting the wind just enough to keep it distracted. Your cousin brings over a tray of dried fruit, figs, apricots, raisins. Grandmother sets them in the middle of the circle. The cat appears, meows, once, then curls up behind your cousin's knee like a particularly cynical potato. Then grandmother begins. Her voice, usually so sharp, goes soft, measured, in the time before roofs, she says, before doors and markets, and mint tea. The desert was a mouth that swallowed sound. It didn't care what you built, or prayed, or feared, but it liked stories, especially ones with sharp teeth and soft endings. Fringe tidbit: one recorded storm vigil text from 10th century Qazvin includes a lullaby sung to the Eater of Roads, a personified storm that only passes once it's been sung to sleep with riddles and flattery. The same text includes instructions to always offer the storm dates, not figs, or risk an itchy nose for 7 nights. You reach for a raisin. Grandmother slaps your hand. You don't eat until the 3rd tale, she says. You know this. You don't know this. But no one argues with her. Your uncle, who hasn't spoken in an hour, suddenly leans forward. Let me tell it, he says. Grandmother raises an eyebrow, but gestures for him to begin. And so he does. It's a story about a man who lost his voice and had to trick the wind into giving it back. The wind was vain, of course. It always is, and so the man made a flute from a snake's rib and played until the wind thought it was being serenaded. It gave him back his voice, and he used it to ask the wind to go bother someone else. You laugh. So does your cousin. The storm, hearing its name mentioned, knocks loudly on the roof with a branch or a bird or maybe just its elbow. Someone throws another log on the hearth. You shift slightly, the packed earth cool beneath your legs. 2nd tale. A girl who grew figs in her ears to block out her mother's nagging, only to hear the voice of the mountain instead. A bit strange, possibly true. Grandmother finally allows you a dried apricot. Then the 3rd story comes, and it's yours. All heads turn. Open scholarly debate. Some ethnographers believe that storm vigils served as communal psychological anchors, ways of asserting control during helpless conditions. Others argue they were survival mechanisms, in disguise keeping people awake in case the roof gave in, preventing children from panicking, or simply making time pass in a room that smelled like goats and onions. You clear your throat and begin your tale. It's a modest one, about a boy who built a kite out of old bread wrappers and sent it into a sandstorm. The wind carried it up, 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 so high that it got stuck in the stars. But every year after that, the village had one day of clear skies, as if the storm remembered the gift and spared them in thanks. When you finish, no one claps. Grandmother just says, "Good." And then she leans forward and says, 4th tale. Mine. This one's about the well. Not yours, not the sealed one in the yard, but an old well on the edge of a forgotten caravan route filled not with water, but with echoes. You could drop in a word and Hear it come back in a dozen different voices. Older, younger, angry, gentle. It wasn't magic, she says, just the desert listening. The candles flicker. You glance at the clock of stones. 6 tails down. The storm grumbles again, but it doesn't break the roof. Not yet. By the time the 7th story ends, something about a jealous jar of pickles cursing its owner with hiccups, you've lost all sense of time. The storm still hisses outside, but it feels farther away now, like a conversation you're only half listening to through a thick curtain. Your cousin dozes beside you, head bobbing like a pigeon, but grandmother is relentless. She claps her hands once, and everyone jolts. 8th tale, she says. But this one's not a story, it's a task. She points to you. Get the bowl. You blink. What bowl? She jerks her thumb toward a shelf near the far wall where a dusty copper basin sits beneath a folded white cloth. You fetch it carefully. It's heavier than it looks, and etched with flower patterns that have long since lost their color. Mainstream fact. In many Persian households, particularly rural ones before the 14th century, copper bowls were believed to hold not just water, but memory. They were used in rituals to catch the essence of a household filled during ceremonies and emptied only after a crisis had passed. Some bowls were never emptied at all. Family members swore they could taste old laughter in the water. Put it in the center, grandmother says. You set the bowl on the packed earth between the circle of stones. She nods and tosses in a handful of rose petals. The petals swirl once before settling. Now we stir. She hands you a wooden spoon with a cracked handle. You dip it gently, making slow circles. Fringe tidbit. There's a regional superstition, especially around Yazd, that if you stir water counterclockwise during a storm, you confuse the wind spirits, and they leave you alone. Stir clockwise, and they remember your scent. So, of course, you stir counterclockwise. Slowly, carefully. The candlelight reflects off the copper in soft ripples. You catch your own reflection, warped and wobbly, like someone watching you from the bottom of a puddle. Then, grandmother begins to hum. It's a strange tune, one you think you've heard before, maybe at a wedding or during a fever. Everyone else joins in, off-key, but determined. Your uncle starts whistling through his teeth, adding a strange harmony. The cat leaves the room in protest. You keep stirring. The bowl begins to steam, not from heat, but from sheer insistence. The room fills with the scent of roses and warm metal. You blink, and for a moment it feels like the storm has seeped inside and decided to curl up for a nap. Say the words, grandmother murmurs. You hesitate. What words? She raises one graying eyebrow. Any words. Make them yours. You look into the bowl and whisper, stay outside. We're busy. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these household rituals were meant to summon protection or distract from fear. Some say they began as oral contracts with nature reciprocal gestures of respect. Others think they were simply ways to pass time in homes too quiet and too fragile for sleep. Either way, the bowl listens. You stir one more time. The petals form a spiral, then drift apart. Outside, the wind shifts. It's subtle, like a pause between heartbeats, but it's there. Grandmother exhales. Good enough. She stands, knees cracking like old doors. Now we cover it. You place the cloth back over the bowl. What happens if I take the cloth off tomorrow, you ask? She leans in, her voice almost a whisper. Then the wind remembers. You decide not to test it. A soft knock at the door. Not the wind this time, a real knock. Your father opens it cautiously and exchanges a few words with someone outside. Then he shuts it again and returns with news the neighbors' goats are safe, but one of their fences is gone, swept clean, as if it never existed. Everyone murmurs. You glance at the bowl. Just a coincidence, probably. Or not. Someone yawns loudly. Grandmother waves a hand. Ninth tale comes after tea. Bring the kettle. You rise again, legs tingling from sitting too long. The kettle rests near the hearth, still warm from earlier. As you pour the water, you hear someone mutter, "At least we're not like those villagers in Ardakan." You perk up. What happened in Ardakan? Your cousin grins. They challenged the storm to a shouting contest and lost. Apparently, they shouted into the wind for 3 hours before their roof gave in and dumped a week's worth of sand on the lentils. Even the chickens refused to come back inside. Fringe tidbit. In the central deserts, children sometimes wore necklaces made of dried pomegranate peel during sandstorms, believed to absorb hot air and prevent nosebleeds. One traveler reported seeing a dog wearing one too, though whether it worked on dogs is still hilariously unconfirmed. You sip the tea, its bitter floral grounding. You think about the bowl, the petals, the stories, and how somehow it all seems to be working. Even the storm sounds tired now, like it's curled up just outside the wall, listening to you stir the air into silence. You wake to the sound of silence, an unfamiliar quiet, like the house is holding its breath. The storm has paused, or left, or died in its sleep, perhaps bored by all the stories. Either way, the hush is heavy, like the calm after a funeral or before a particularly brave breakfast. You stretch under your woven blanket and shuffle to the doorway. The courtyard is half buried in sand, drifts curled around the pomegranate trees like sleeping cats. The sky is pale, scrubbed clean by wind. A bird lands awkwardly on the cracked edge of the well and shakes its feathers as if insulted. You smile. Then grandmother calls out, her voice already bossy, already halfway through a list of tasks. Mainstream fact, in many Persian villages, especially those near the Dasht-e-Kavir, life after a sandstorm was a dance of routine. People didn't just rebuild, they swept, scrubbed, sorted, and re-invoked the everyday, like it was a sacred ritual. The belief wasn't just in survival, but in restoring order, because cleanliness in Persian culture was often synonymous with cosmic harmony. You're handed a broom, not a modern plastic kind, but one made of bundled twigs tied tightly with a fraying strip of goat hide. It sheds dust with every stroke, but somehow manages to push more than it drops. You begin at the doorstep. Your cousin grumbles beside you, sweeping like he's trying to erase a bad memory. Someone has found the copper bowl and placed it on the windowsill, cloth still on petals, probably soup by now. Fringe tidbit. In certain villages near Kerman, it was taboo to throw away storm water collected in ritual bowls. Instead, it was poured onto the oldest tree in the courtyard, believed to carry the household's memory. One tree was said to whisper after dark, not words, just rustles that sounded suspiciously opinionated. Don't pour it yet, grandmother warns. The tree's not awake. You blink at her. Trees sleep. She looks at you like you've asked whether socks can have feelings. Yes. And don't interrupt them mid-dream. Makes the fruit sour. The cleanup continues. You rake sand from under the benches, uncover the water jug, rescue a collapsed lantern. Your brother finds a spoon embedded in the courtyard, like a tiny Excalibur. He keeps it like a prize. Your aunt is in the kitchen, scrubbing dried lentils off the ceiling with vinegar and muttering insults at the wind. Every few minutes, she pauses to sniff the air, checking for lingering storm. You're not sure if she expects it to smell like wet camel or fear. Then comes the gate. It creaks when you open it, and a small avalanche falls in from the street. Outside the village looks off. The mosque's dome is missing a tile again. The baker's sign now hangs upside down. A palm tree has acquired a scarf, presumably stolen from someone's clothesline. But the people, they're already moving, already fixing, already laughing at how strange the world becomes when sand thinks it's in charge. Open scholarly debate. Anthropologists still argue whether these quick returns to routine were cultural resilience or necessary denial. Some claim that the rhythm of normal life helped people regulate anxiety. Others think the rituals were performative shields, an outward show of strength in communities too exposed to afford visible fear. Either way, someone's already started painting over the wind's graffiti. Your job is to help grandmother dust the shelves of her storm cupboard. A small alcove near the back of the house stacked with oddities, dried herbs in clay jars, a cracked oil lamp that only works when it wants to, several stones that supposedly change color when rain is coming. They don't. And a collection of small wooden birds, she swears, guard the house. You sneeze. Careful, she warns. The dust remembers insults. You apologize to the dust. Then comes the tea again. Always tea, as reliable as gravity. You sit in the half-sun, sipping slowly, feeling the warmth seep into places the storm had chilled. A neighbor passes by, holding a chicken, like a briefcase. He nods. The chicken seems less impressed. fringe tidbit. In some villages, chickens were considered wind readers. Before storms, they'd cluck unusually or sit on rooftops and stare at the horizon. One village even held an annual hen prophecy day, where the most uncooperative bird was crowned Weather Queen. She wore a ribbon, briefly. Someone calls out news of a lost goat found in the hammam. You join in the laughter. Even the sky seems amused, dotted with a few clouds shaped like smug camels. You look over at the old tree. It's awake now. Grandmother gives you the nod. You walk to the copper bowl, carefully lift the cloth, and carry it to the base of the tree. The petals are limp water tinged pink. You pour it slowly. The roots drink it without complaint. Mainstream fact: in ancient Zoroastrian tradition, water was one of the pure elements. Aban, and returning it to nature after ritual use was an act of restoration, not just disposal, but gratitude. The bowl, now empty, gleams brighter in the light. You place it back on the windowsill. The day moves forward. Chickens return to being chickens. Cousins resume their nonsense. The wind retreats to wherever wind goes when it's had enough mischief. Later, as the sun leans toward sleep, you sit beneath the tree. The courtyard hums with normalcy, and yet you still feel it. The hush beneath the noise, the memory in the copper, the way a bowl of petals and stories might just hold a storm at bay. You close your eyes and breathe. The dust, for now, has forgotten your name. That night, after the courtyard has been swept twice, and grandmother has declared the earth no longer offended, you find yourself once again under the stars. The storm has left behind a peculiar stillness, like the world is waiting for its next cue. But the orchestra hasn't returned from tea. The air is sweet, with dust-softened jasmine and the distant scent of baked clay. The moon is fuller now, bright enough to cast shadows, and you sit with your back against the old pomegranate tree, knees drawn to your chest. Its bark is cool and rough behind you, and you imagine it whispering the stories the copper bowl couldn't hold. You hear soft footsteps. Your father approaches quiet as a shadow and sits beside you without a word. He's not usually the one to join you in these moments. That's more your uncle's domain, with his endless supply of riddles and bad jokes. But tonight feels different. After a while, he clears his throat. There was once a traveler, he says, who got caught in a sandstorm outside Ray. You turn to him, startled by the unexpected story. He found a shepherd's hut, empty, save for a jug of water and a note. The note said, "Drink only if the storm speaks your name." You raise an eyebrow. What did he do? Your father smiles slightly. He waited. 3 days. No food, just the water staring back at him. And on the 4th night, the wind whispered something that sounded like his name. So he drank, and he lived. Mainstream fact: in early medieval Persia, travelers often left coded messages in remote shelters, using poetic riddles or metaphorical warnings instead of direct instructions. This practice served two purposes: deterring thieves unfamiliar with local phrasing and creating a sense of sacredness in shared survival spaces. Your father doesn't explain the moral, and you don't ask. Some stories are just for telling. You both sit in silence for a while, watching a small owl loop through the moonlight. Its wings are so quiet, you only hear it when it lands on the edge of the well, blinking slowly, like it's evaluating the quality of your thoughts. Fringe tidbit. In rural Persian superstition, owls were believed to carry storm fragments in their feathers. A household visited by an owl after a sandstorm had to burn rue or scatter pomegranate ash to shake loose the lingering wind. Grandmother would probably already be preparing both. Eventually, your father pats your shoulder, stands, and walks back inside. You stay. You think about the stories, the bowl, the petals, the shout-off in Articon, the goat in the hammam, the chickens predicting doom, and you realize none of it was ever about the storm. It was about what people did because of it, how they gathered, how they remembered, how they folded fear into story and stitched uncertainty into laughter. Open scholarly debate. Historians often disagree on whether the rituals around sandstorms in Persian culture were rooted in genuine spiritual beliefs or practical coping mechanisms. Were the bowls, songs, and whispered commands sincere attempts at weather manipulation, or were they simply containers for courage, an organized defiance wrapped in metaphor? Either way, they worked. You close your eyes. In your half-dreaming state, you imagine the wind returning, not violent, not angry, but curious. It tiptoes past your window, lifts the corner of the cloth over the copper bowl, sees the petals sleeping, and tucks it back in, like a gentle ant. Fringe tidbit. There is an old children's rhyme from the Yazd region that begins, "Wind, wind, don't find me late. My tea is warm, and my door is not great." It's usually sung with one eye open and a broom in hand. You hum it softly now, without meaning to. The owl blinks once, then vanishes into the dark, and you finally stand. The house glows faintly behind you. Its walls, patched and sand-kissed, seem stronger now, not because they resisted the storm, but because they cradled the stories that followed. You place your hand on the old tree and whisper a thank you. It doesn't answer, but it doesn't need to. You step inside, careful not to wake the others, and slide under your blanket, just as the wind picks up again, only a little like a sigh. And for the first time since the storm began, you sleep without dreaming of dust. You've never been on a ship, but this must be what sailing feels like, except you're not cutting through water. You're waiting for it to cut through you. The walls begin to vibrate, not constantly, but in short, sharp bursts like a hiccup in the bones of the house. A ripple of force moves through the timbers, and each time it comes, the roof creaks like the hull of something ancient and exhausted. You place your palm flat against the wall. It thrums, not a sound, a pressure. It passes from plaster into your skin, into your muscles, into the tight little clutch of nerves just under your ribs. You sit very still. Outside, the sand has stopped pretending to be wind. It's rain now, if rain were made of stone. It slams against the house in volleys, like someone flinging gravel by the handful. Your shutters rattle so hard, you think one might give way, but they hold barely. Mainstream fact. Persian homes in sandstorm-prone areas were often built with double-layered walls or thick mud brick to dampen external noise and reinforce structural strength. The interior walls might flex, but they were less likely to collapse under pressure. Every 10 seconds or so, a deep cracking sound echoes down the lane. It might be a palm tree losing a branch, might be a door blown off its hinges, might be something worse. The worst part is you don't know, and you can't go look. The lamps flicker just a little, enough to remind you that fire needs air, and tonight even the air is afraid. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers used to tie tiny bells to the eaves of their roofs, not to ward off spirits, but as crude storm indicators. If the bells rang too fast, you had about 2 minutes to get underground. If they rang not at all, the roof might already be gone. Your neighbor once collected those bells. He strung them like charms across his ceiling, each one marking a storm survived. 56 bells. He called them his wind choir. You don't hear any bells now. Historians still argue whether ancient Persian builders used deliberate sonic principles when constructing homes, especially regarding how sound waves from storms echoed or dispersed. Some theories suggest that homes were shaped to hum at a frequency that soothed anxiety, or at least spread it evenly through the body so it could be endured. Your body does not feel soothed. You curl your toes inside your sandals. A small pile of sand has made it under the door despite everything. It's dry and cold and somehow crawls toward your foot like it wants to join the warmth of something alive. You swipe it away. Another thud, this time from the roof. Not the usual tap or rattle. A solid impact like someone dropped a bag of grain from the heavens. You whisper to yourself, not for comfort, but for rhythm. Let it pass. Let it pass. Let it pass. You don't believe it yet. But maybe the rhythm will help you survive until you do. You think about the animals in the courtyard. The goat. The chickens. Did someone get them into the covered area? Did they find shelter, or are they huddled under the eaves, blinking through grit, noses pressed into cracked clay? You want to look. But there's no opening now. That wouldn't let the storm in. Curiosity is no longer an asset. It's a liability. That's a lesson everyone learns, eventually. You hear it again. Not the thud, but the groan. The kind of groan that buildings make when they remember they're temporary. You pick up the lantern. It's light too light. The oil is almost gone. You place it back down and sit. That's all there is to do now. Sit and wait and hope that the house is stronger than whatever wants inside. Another jolt. This time it's not just a sound, it's motion. A tremble in the floorboards, not strong enough to knock anything loose, but enough to make you stand. You brace the doorway with your hands. just like they taught you. Door frames are strongest, or at least that's the theory. But what if the door frame is the first thing the storm wants? You close your eyes and press your forehead to the wood. It smells of oil, of hands, of smoke, comfort smells, familiar smells, human smells. You cling to them. Outside the wind screams again, but this time it's higher pitched, less angry, more frantic, like it's searching or hunting or calling to someone who isn't answering. The sound of everything shaking is also the sound of everything enduring. You remind yourself of that. Then in the center of it all, one soft noise, a bowl tipping off the shelf and landing without breaking. You walk over and pick it up, still whole. That's something. You hold the bowl in your hands longer than necessary. It's a small fired clay thing, the rim worn smooth from years of being used and washed and used again. It's unremarkable, really, but right now, it's a miracle. Something that fell and didn't break. You set it down gently on the table, like returning a sacred object to its altar. Then you sit beside it. You press your fingers flat against the tabletop just to feel something stable, something unmoved. The walls creak again, and then comes a new sound. You don't hear it right away because it doesn't announce itself like the others. It doesn't scream or rattle or slam. It whistles, a soft, reedy whistle, like wind through a flute. It's coming from the back corner near the window. You creep toward it, not because you want to, because your brain demands that you understand what's trying to get in. You crouch low and press your ear to the wall. Mainstream fact, Persian homes often had small ventilation slits built into their upper walls to allow trapped heat to escape during brutal summers. During a sandstorm, these same slits could let in whistles of wind that turned quiet rooms into harmonizing chambers. Some even say the homes sang. That's what it sounds like your house is trying to sing. Off key maybe, but not broken. You can't stop a smile. It feels wrong, like laughing at a funeral, but it comes anyway. Then, just like that, the whistle cuts off. It doesn't trail. It ends. That's worse. You freeze. Your heartbeat feels like a blacksmith's hammer, now forging weapons from fear. You wait for something to happen, but nothing does, until something does. Thud. No, not like before. This isn't the roof. It's the door. Someone is knocking. You don't breathe. You don't blink. You sit very still, listening to your heartbeat migrate into your ears. No one would be out there now. No one could unless they have to be. Quirky tidbit. In rural Persia, some storm travelers would tie long wooden rattles to their backs. These wind bones would clatter like skeletal xylophones, announcing the presence of a human, even if their voice couldn't rise above the gale. You don't hear bones, just another knock. You walk slowly, heavily toward the door. You press your eye to the side crack, but see nothing. Only dust, an ocean of it. And beyond that, shapes maybe. A blur of something not sky. You lean your body weight into the door, just in case it's not locked tight enough. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the knocking stops, and silence returns. Sort of. There's never full silence in a storm like this, just different textures of noise. You walk away from the door, back to your table. You feel smaller than you did before. You wonder what it was. A person, a branch, a piece of wall from a neighbor's house. You'll never know. Historians still debate whether Persian villagers kept emergency signaling systems, whether coded knocks or firelight pulses were used during extreme weather. Some old chronicles mention door messengers, beings or humans who traveled from house to house with news even in storms, though the accounts blur myth and fact. You let yourself think maybe it was someone checking you were still alive. You nod to that invisible messenger, just in case. Your oil lamp flutters again, and for a moment you wonder if this is how it ends, not with fire or falling walls, but with darkness creeping in one wick at a time. You have 2 more candles. You light one. Slowly, carefully. You shield it with your palm, like it's the last bit of civilization in the world. It flickers, but holds. So do you. You go to the back of the house and check the window again. The frame's bowed slightly inward. Not broken, but stressed. You brace a stool beneath it. The stool is rickety. A joke, really. But it makes you feel like you've done something, and sometimes that's enough. You sit again, and for the first time you notice your own breathing. It's shallow, uneven. You've been holding yourself tense for so long your muscles buzz like bees. You roll your shoulders, shake your hands, close your eyes, and when you open them, the candle's still burning. The house is still here, and so are you. You shift your weight slightly on the woven mat beneath you, feeling every crease and bump of the reed fibers pressing into your thighs. It's comforting somehow, real, tactile. Not wind, not dust, not dread, just mat. You listen again, and something's changed. The storm hasn't stopped, no, but its voice has shifted. Less like an angry mob and more like a muttering crowd. Still dangerous, but tired. You glance at the candle, still flickering. You let your eyes wander to the shelf beside the fireplace. There, stacked with the clumsiness of someone always in a rush, are your grandmother's cooking bowls. Clay tin, and the one she insisted was made from meteorite, though it was more likely just burnished iron. You don't care either way. She was always more poetry than science. Mainstream fact. In many Persian villages, kitchenware was passed down through generations, believed to absorb the essence of those who used them. A grandmother's ladle might be valued not for its function, but for the hand that once stirred saffron rice, with it every Nowruz. You reach up, pluck the so-called meteorite bowl, and set it beside the candle. Just because. You don't know what you're doing, but it feels ceremonial, necessary. The wind moans again, as if disappointed by your calm. Let it be. You move to the hearth. No fire, of course, not tonight. But you reach in, and scoop some cold ash. You don't know why. Maybe it's to remember that fire existed even when it doesn't now. Then, like a memory returning, you remember the box. It's buried beneath your sleeping mat, tucked behind a folded robe you haven't worn since last spring. You lift the mat dig through the fabric, and your fingers close around the edges of lacquered wood. You draw it out slowly, reverently. The box is small, heavy, locked with a bronze clasp that never quite lines up right. Inside, old letters, well, letter-shaped things, folded cloth scraps with writing inked by hand, some of it smudged from years of being thumbed through in secret. They're not yours. They're your uncle's, or maybe your great-uncle's. They weren't meant for you, but no one ever told you not to read them, so you did. Each letter begins the same. If you're reading this, the wind hasn't taken you yet. Quirky tidbit. Some Persian families used personal journals during storm seasons, not diaries of events, but emotional check-ins, written like letters to future readers. A mix of therapy and time capsule meant to reassure someone down the line that fear could be documented, survived, even laughed at. You read one of them now. It talks about a cat that refused to come inside during a storm, insisting on hiding beneath a pile of sugarcane baskets, only to emerge looking more offended than scared. You smile. The cat's name was Ardashir. You never met him, but he feels real. You fold the letter, tuck it into your shirt, and move back to the table. The wind shifts again. Not louder, just different. A new rhythm, like someone dragging fabric along the outer wall. You don't check this time. You've learned not everything demands a reaction. Historians still argue whether sandstorms in Persia were seasonal or sporadic. Some believe they followed predictable lunar cycles, while others cite decades where no patterns could be discerned. What is agreed on, though, is that the psychological impact, what modern folk might call storm trauma, was deeply rooted in the collective psyche of desert communities. You exhale. You let your body slump a little. You hum, softly, a tune with no words. Maybe it's the one your grandmother used to sing when she stirred lentils over the fire. Or maybe it's something you invented just now. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it fills the room. And for a second, there is no wind, no storm, no thud at the door, no owl, no off-key whistles. Just you and that little bowl of ash. And the song that doesn't need a name. The wind hasn't vanished, but it has learned to mind its manners. Its howls dip into sighs, its roars slouch into low throat-clearing groans, and the shutters, once insistent in their rattling fury, now click against their frames like someone nervously drumming fingers on a table. You stretch your legs, slowly, carefully, and cross to the door, not to open it, of course, but just to press your palm against the wood. Cool, dry, still firm. The sand hasn't claimed it. Not yet. You think about what people say, that storms strip everything bare. But tonight you're not so sure. It feels less like stripping and more like sifting, like the wind is sorting your memories for you, blowing the stale ones away and polishing the ones you should have never forgotten. Mainstream fact: during Safavid and Qajar periods, Persian villagers were known to preserve oral traditions through nighttime storytelling, especially during storms. These tales weren't only for entertainment, they served as survival tools, bonding rituals, and sometimes coded lessons in resilience or warnings in metaphor. You return to your seat by the candle and pick up a book, thin cloth bound with no title on the front. It's not a holy text or a famous poem. It's a village chronicle, a patchwork of births, weddings, harvest tallies, and the occasional strange occurrence. You flip to a random page and find a line scribbled diagonally across a record of apricot sales. 2 boys vanished into a storm, returned a day later with sunburns and a goat. You chuckle. That one again. You've read that line every storm season for years, and still no one can tell you whose boys they were, or why no one wanted the goat afterward. You turn another page and pause. Someone sketched a map, rough swirling lines like lazy river's dots for houses, and a spiral where your home should be. Not an X, not a square, a spiral. Quirky tidbit. Spirals in old Persian village symbology often represented memory. Unlike circles which implied perfection, or eternity, spirals hinted at returning to the same place but with deeper understanding. Kind of like rereading your own diary and noticing what you skipped over the first time. You trace the spiral with your finger. You wonder who drew it and why it matters to you so much right now. You hear a small noise behind you, like fabric settling. You don't turn, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Some sounds don't demand curiosity. They demand quiet companionship. You close the book and lean back. Let the storm pass. Historians still argue whether villagers used maps for practical navigation or symbolic ritual. Some suggest they were tools for migration planning. Others think they were more like talismans, guiding memory rather than feet. Whatever the truth, it seems that even cartography can be an act of dreaming. You gaze around the room. Everything is where it should be. The candle, the bowl, the letter in your shirt, the bowl of ash still faintly warm, the ghost of Ardashir, the cat, purring in your imagination. You smile at the absurdity of it all. Storms used to scare you. Now they feel like invitations to pause, to sort through the clutter, to let silence speak more loudly than thunder ever could. Your eyes feel heavier now. The candle leans, but doesn't fall. Its flame flickers with purpose, not panic. You hum again without meaning to. The spiral deepens. You stir again, not from discomfort, not from fear, but because you've remembered something. Not a detail, not a name, a smell. It rises gentle and unexpected from the folds of a cushion beside you, cinnamon and wood smoke. Not recent, not real, a memory of scent, or a scent of memory. one your brain stitched into this moment as the wind softened. You lean your head against the cushion and close your eyes, letting it wash over you. That smell, grandfather's coat, the one he wore only for long walks through dust storms, tied with a red cord and dusted with soot. He used to swear it made him invisible to foxes and storm spirits alike. You believed him? You still do. Mainstream fact. In rural Persian communities, scent memory was a tool for emotional resilience. Smells of cloves, rosewater, or burning cedar were used to anchor the mind during times of stress, like during sandstorms, funerals, or harvest failures. Some would even rub perfume on house beams so that their children would associate home with safety, regardless of the weather. You open your eyes and trace the edge of the red cord on your own sleeve. You didn't plan to wear this robe tonight. It was an accident. But maybe not. The candle has burned low. The wax has puddled into a pale disk, cooling like a frozen sun. You light another from the cupboard beneath the bread bin. You do it with practiced care, striking flint to steel, holding dry grass, near shielding the flame from the breeze that always finds its way in. A flame like memory needs coaxing more than command. You set the new candle down beside the bowl of ash. The two glow together, now sun and moon. You sit cross-legged and begin to hum again. But this time you let your hand drum gently on your knee, tapping out a rhythm older than the words you forgot. Da-da, da-dum, da-da-da-dum. It's nothing and everything. You think of the stories carved into the walls of caravanserais, those great roadside inns where travelers etched names, insults, poems, and the occasional plea to the wind gods. Some are still visible. Some have been worn away. Some were never meant to last. Quirky tidbit. Persian caravanserais often featured storm corners, small alcoves where travelers could sit and reflect sometimes, with small brass instruments for soft music, or bowls of salt for calming rituals. It was believed these spaces helped soothe nerves frayed by the road or the weather. Your room is no caravanserai, but it has its corners, its instruments, its rituals. You lean into the wall and listen not for the wind, but for silence. The best kind of silence, the kind that hums back when you hum, the kind that remembers. You remember the goat story again. You remember Ardashir. You remember your mother's favorite song, though only the last line, and the pomegranate watched, but never spoke. You remember how you used to count lightning flashes not because you feared thunder, but because someone told you each flash was a message from a storm god deciding whether or not to answer your wish. You never wished for big things, just that the roof would hold, just that the cat would return, just that the water wouldn't taste of sand in the morning. Simple things. You reach for another letter from the box. This one's written on pale yellow linen, almost translucent. The ink is smudged. The folds are soft from being reopened too many times. If you're reading this, it says, "Then the sky has not swallowed you, and the floor has not opened, and the noise outside your window is not your name." You pause. Let that settle. The letter continues, "So sleep. And when you wake, forget the fear, but not the sound, because the wind sings what we forget." You fold it slowly, as if it might crumble. Then you tuck it beside the candle. You don't need to hide it anymore. The spiral is deepening, and you are not lost in it. You are centered. The room grows warmer, not from heat, but from familiarity. You could walk this space with your eyes closed and in a way you already are. Each object, each shelf fold of curtain, dent in the floor, is more than physical. It's a breadcrumb on a trail back to yourself. You reach for the copper bowl one more time, tipping the petals gently with your finger. The once dry hibiscus has absorbed moisture from the air and feels supple again, like it's remembering how to bloom. A thud, not violent, not threatening, just something shifting outside. You don't flinch. You've passed that threshold now. Outside, a palm branch has likely dropped its load of sand. Maybe the storm loosened it, or maybe the weight of the night just became too much. You think of the gardener's apprentice from your uncle's village who once said, "Even palm trees sigh when the wind is too much." You liked that. You made it your bedtime mantra for years. Mainstream fact: in Persian poetry and daily life, palm trees were often anthropomorphized as wise, resilient beings. Their fronds were seen as symbols of both patience and sorrow, especially during times of drought or storm. A bowed palm wasn't weak, it was listening. You wonder what the palms are hearing tonight. You stand letting the blanket fall, not because you're cold or restless, but because your body is ready. It knows what comes next. You walk barefoot across the tile floor. The coolness wakes the pads of your feet, but it doesn't jolt. It grounds, like walking across a mosaic of chilled memories. At the doorway, you stop, not out of caution, but out of reverence. You're about to enter the atrium. It isn't large, just 4 stone columns, a shallow fountain in the middle, and a roof with a single open circle where moonlight or sand can fall straight through. You step in. Tonight the fountain is dry, but it has gathered sand in perfect spirals, like someone traced the edges with a brush. You don't want to disturb it, so you walk the perimeter. Instead, your steps silent, and you look up. The sky has cracked open, not entirely, not triumphantly, just a few shy stars peeking through the cloud veil, blinking uncertainly, as if wondering if it's safe to shine. You blink back. Quirky tidbit. Some rural Persian families taught children to wink at stars after storms as a way to re-establish connection with the heavens. It was said to encourage the stars to return more fully the next night. You try it. A gentle wink, nothing theatrical. The wind is still there, yes, but quieter, less of a shout, more of a mumble. Your ears can finally hear other things again, your breath, a dog barking distantly, the stretch of fabric as you shift your weight. The world is reintroducing itself, and it's slower now. You take a seat on the edge of the fountain, running your fingers along its rim. Bits of sand stick to your skin. You don't brush them off. Historians still argue whether these courtyard spaces were designed more for function or philosophy. Were they meant to cool the house or calm the soul? Were the open ceilings practical or sacred? Did the water purify or simply soothe? You think, why not both? You lean your head back. The circle of sky seems to grow as you watch it, not physically, just perceptually. Like your breath has stretched the frame a little. You sing a line from the lullaby again, the one your mother liked to hum while brushing your hair. The sky is a sieve, and your dreams are the flower. You still don't know what it means, but it doesn't matter. Meaning isn't always the point. You glance toward the door leading back inside. You could go. Lie down again. Pull the blanket close and finish the spiral you started. But your body has another idea. You lie back on the fountain's edge, careful not to disturb the sand spiral in the basin. You fold your arms beneath your head and look up, not expecting more stars, just honoring the ones already brave enough to show themselves. And you listen to the silence, to your own breath, to the pulse of a world still shifting, but no longer shaking. You drift there, half stretched, on the edge of the dry fountain, like a cat that's claimed the warmest stone in the garden. The sky overhead no longer trembles. It holds. A breeze curls into the atrium, not the kind that whistles and bangs, but one that tiptoes. It smells of dust and citrus rind, maybe from that old tree behind the neighbor's courtyard. Or maybe just your imagination, stirring the air into memory. Your eyes scan the circle of night sky again. The stars are steadier now. They don't blink so much as breathe. There's a weightlessness to this moment that makes you forget the tiles are stone. You feel like you could float. You remember a story from a traveling poet who once visited your grandfather. He spoke of a night just like this, when the wind stopped and the stars returned, and a woman sang from a rooftop. The poet swore her voice was so clear, the sand itself rearranged into verses across the courtyard. She sang the wind to sleep, he claimed, then added with a wink, and I've been chasing her echo ever since. Mainstream fact, in many Persian towns, rooftops were used not just for storage or drying fruit, but as spaces for music, story sharing, and sleep. The open air was thought to soothe troubled dreams and allow prayers to rise more swiftly to the heavens. You wonder how many echoes are trapped in the clay walls around you. Your hand finds a small piece of pottery near the base of the fountain, rounded smooth, with a faint blue glaze, maybe from a dropped teacup or a child's toy. You hold it in your palm. It hums with history. The fountain beneath you, though dry, holds echoes too. You press your ear to the edge and wait. Nothing dramatic, just the soft acoustic of stillness, like a conch shell that's heard 1,000 bedtime confessions. Quirky tidbit. In some rural Persian regions, it was believed that dry fountains could trap voices during sandstorms, and that you could hear fragments of old conversations if you lay your head on the rim the morning after. You try. You really do. And maybe, just maybe, you catch the hint of a laugh. Not yours, not anyone you know, but one that warms the inside of your chest like a cup of cardamom tea. The floor beneath your back cools as you lie longer. You feel its firmness support your breath. Your ribs move like slow bellows. Historians still argue whether atriums in desert homes were symbolic of Eden miniature gardens meant to represent divine order, or simply practical cooling systems built around the geometry of shade. Some suggest both views are true layered, like the stones in the walls themselves. You don't need to decide. You just know this courtyard is a compass. And right now, it points inward. You trace the crack along one tile with your toe. It veers slightly like a river, changing course. Someone, maybe you as a child, once tried to cover it with chalk. A yellow line, now faded, still lingers in the groove. You smile. Above you, a bat slices across the circle of sky. One loop, then gone. No drama. Just a night worker checking in. Another breeze. You sit up. This isn't restlessness. It's readiness. You pad silently across the tiles, careful of the sand spirals, and step into the corridor that leads to the storeroom. Why? Because that's where the storm box lives. Every Persian home has one, or had one once. A small chest or cabinet filled with objects too strange or beloved to throw away. Dried orange peels, a broken tea strainer, an old scarf that still smells like cedar. Nothing of monetary value, but everything imbued with memory. Yours is tucked beneath the lowest shelf, wrapped in a tattered blue cloth. You kneel, unwrap it, lift the lid. The scent hits first rosewater and old smoke with a trace of saffron. Inside, the contents shift softly, as if they too have been waiting for the wind to stop. You reach in and pull out a miniature fan made of date palm strips. It's brittle now and missing 2 blades, but it still catches air. You wave it once. It makes a sound like someone exhaling through their teeth. You laugh quietly. That kind of laughter that doesn't wake the house. You pull out more, a feather, a shard of mirror, a walnut shell, carved with the tiniest horse you've ever seen, and finally, a scrap of paper, folded a dozen times corners, frayed. You open it. It's your handwriting. From a time when the letters leaned forward as if they were eager to grow up. You read, "If the sand comes again, I will not be afraid. I will gather stories in the fountain. I will sing like the rooftop girl. I will wink at the stars and sleep in the atrium until the wind forgets my name." You blink. You don't remember writing it, but you know every word is true. You fold the paper, return it, to the box, close the lid. You leave the storeroom and step into the corridor again. No need to rush. The night is wide, and it holds you like the earth holds a seed. Your feet glide silently over the smooth, worn tiles as you move toward the far end of the courtyard, the place where the moonlight puddles like cream, and the oldest wall leans just slightly, as though exhausted from centuries of holding up your dreams. That wall holds a secret. Every old Persian courtyard does. Not a dramatic secret like a hidden passage or a treasure chest, though you wouldn't say no to that, but a quieter kind, more like a whisper. You reach for a loose stone near the bottom. You know which one. It's slightly darker than the others, and if you press the top edge and wiggle it, it tilts forward with a faint sigh. Behind it lies a hollow, just large enough to fit a few things: a flint, a spool of red thread, and a palm-sized clay charm baked with a sun symbol etched crudely on one side and what might be your name scratched into the other. Or maybe it's someone else's. It's hard to tell after all these years. Mainstream fact. Protective amulets were common in Persian households, often made from clay bone or cloth. Some were inscribed with ancient prayers. Others simply held the owner's personal markings. They weren't necessarily religious. Many were purely folk magic passed down and believed to guard homes from ill winds and misfortune. You hold the charm in your hand. It's rough and cool, like it still remembers being under the earth. You place it gently on the stone edge of the fountain, facing the courtyard like a tiny sentinel. Then you sit back against the leaning wall, knees pulled up, hands resting loosely. The night isn't silent. It's full of the quietest sounds: the rustle of fig leaves, the occasional drip from a cracked pot, the distant yawn of a donkey 2 streets away. You swear someone's peeling an orange in the room next door. The scent blooms into the air, light and sharp. Quirky tidbit. In some villages it was believed that peeling an orange at night without breaking the spiral of rind would grant you a peaceful sleep. The longer the peel, the better the dreams. It's possible this belief originated as a distraction for anxious minds, and frankly, it still works. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the perfect orange peel. One long, unbroken twist, like a sand devil, frozen mid-spin. But sleep doesn't come yet. Not quite. So, you get up again. You move toward the narrow stairway leading up to the flat roof, your hand brushing along the cool stone rail as you climb. Each step creaks not with wood, but with the shifting of lime and clay beneath your weight. The house recognizes you. It adjusts. At the top, the night opens like a book. The sky is thick with stars now, uninterrupted by wind. They seem brighter after the storm scrubbed clean by the sand's fury. You step to the center of the roof and lie down on your back, your arms flung wide like you're making a snow angel in the warm air. Historians still argue whether the use of rooftop sleeping platforms in medieval Persia was a response solely to heat, or whether it was also a social practice, an excuse for neighbors to whisper across alleys, for lovers to exchange glances in secret, or for children to learn constellations from the stories of their elders. You don't need to decide tonight. Above you, the sky feels closer than usual, like you could scoop up a handful of stars and put them in your pocket. They wouldn't even burn. They'd hum softly against your thigh, like warm coins. You trace shapes in the air. There's the lion roaring in profile. There's the fish that looks suspiciously like your uncle's sandal. And there's the plow, which also happens to be the same shape as your father's old sickle, now rusting in the shed. You think of that sickle now, of how it once sliced through thick wheat in fields that no longer exist. You imagine each stalk dropping like a sentence finished, a season completed, and in this quiet, everything finishes in slow motion. Not because time has stopped, but because it knows you need gentleness. You notice something on the far edge of the roof, a small stack of bricks arranged in a semicircle. It's a makeshift windbreak built by someone long ago for evenings just like this. You lean against it now, your spine pressing into the warm clay. From this height, the neighborhood unfolds like a quilt. Flat roofs, narrow alleys, one flickering lantern. You can even hear the low murmur of a flute from somewhere far off. Not a performance, just a melody released into the night, like a sigh. You find yourself humming along even though you don't know the tune. Then you remember. There's one last thing left from the storm, a task unspoken but lingering in the back of your mind, like a tune half played. You need to write the storm a letter. No ink, no paper, just a whisper. So you close your eyes and say gently, "You were loud, but I listened. You were wild, but I stayed. You tried to scatter me, but I sat in the courtyard and made friends with the silence. You let the words float up, past the tiles, past the rooftop, toward the ink-dark sky. If they reach the storm wherever it's gone, you hope it smiles. You don't move for a while. Your spine stays curved into that nest of warm brick, your knees gently bent, and your hands folded loosely over your belly, like you're holding a quiet promise. The stars begin to shift, not dramatically, no celestial dance here, but just enough that you notice. That one there, the one you were sure was shaped like a spoon, it's nudged slightly west, like someone tapped it gently with a broomstick. A breeze finds you again, not sharp and aggressive, like the Sandstorm's fury, but soft and searching, like a grandmother's hand on your cheek, checking if you've slept yet. You haven't, but you're close. Mainstream fact. In ancient Persia, architects designed rooftop parapets not only for safety, but also to create airflow channels that funneled cooling breezes across sleeping areas. It wasn't just about function, it was about curating comfort. Rooftop sleeping was architecture's embrace. You reach into your pocket and discover a few grains of sand relics from the storm still clinging to your shirt's hem and your palm lines. You rub them gently between your fingers. They make no sound, but you swear you can hear them. Anyway, tiny whispers of dunes long vanished, and winds that once carried kings' footsteps to their thrones. You chuckle under your breath, which seems out of place in this sleepy quiet. A joke comes to you unexpected. If you tell the wind a secret, does it gossip with the stars, or just carry it into someone else's laundry? Quirky tidbit. In some villages, people swore that if you shouted a wish into the wind during the first breath of a sandstorm, and it made someone sneeze nearby, that wish would come true. No one ever proved it, but you better believe they tried it every spring. You wonder what wish you would have made earlier. Maybe something practical, like a thicker roof. Maybe something grander, like peace in every corner of your grandmother's quilt. Speaking of which, you rise slowly, your joints making faint protest noises, and head back down the steps. The clay still holds your warmth. As you reach the courtyard, you notice it again, that stubborn fig tree, now still. No rustle, no whimper, just a calm silhouette beneath the night sky. And the cistern. Remember that cracked basin earlier? It has gathered a small pool of water, glimmering in the moonlight like a patient coin jar. The storm's gift. You crouch beside it, dip your fingers in, and splash your face. It's cold, sharply awake for a moment. You inhale deeply the scent of damp clay, fig bark, and something like sleep. Historians still argue whether midnight rituals of washing one's face in courtyard water were spiritual, hygienic, or purely habitual. But whether it was about religion, habit, or simply cooling the thoughts, the act itself remains timeless. You reach for the folded cloth that always hangs by the doorway. You know the one. Slightly frayed, smells like sun. You pat your face dry, then sit on the bench beneath the grapevine arch. You lean your head back, eyes half-lidded, staring up at the wooden beams and the occasional hanging lantern still gently swaying. A moth taps once, twice against the glass, then retreats. The arch above you was made decades ago, maybe centuries. It creaks in the exact same spots every time the wind shifts, like it's singing its own lullaby to the vines wrapped around its arms. You stretch your legs out and let your heels rest on the cool tiles. Your ankles pop once in surrender. No more wind, no more sand. Just you, the garden, and the long breath of night, still holding its tone. You think back to the start of the storm, how it felt wild, intrusive, unsettling. And now it's something else. A story, a rhythm, a memory. It has scrubbed your world clean, not destructively, but like a strict old aunt who loves you too much to let you live in clutter. And in its wake, the silence is deeper. So, you decide to do what any good Persian might in such a moment. You tell it a story back, not out loud, just silently in the folds of your breath. You imagine a farmer watching his fields bend under the storm, only to find seedlings stronger the next day. You picture a child who laughed as the wind pulled her braids sideways, even though her mother scolded her for playing outside. You picture yourself years from now, retelling this moment to someone else, saying, "There was one night when the wind tried to carry everything away, but it left behind a better version of the air." You smile, because the truth is, the storm wasn't an interruption. It was a punctuation, and you're the sentence that comes after. You close your eyes. You stay seated for longer than you need to, not because you're waiting for something, but because silence like this feels earned. It wraps itself around your shoulders like a finely woven shawl, the kind someone once embroidered slowly while humming stories into every thread. You lean into it, and the bench doesn't creak under you. It exhales. The courtyard is still. The last echo of the sandstorm has long faded into the hills, and now the entire village seems to breathe with a kind of exhausted relief. There's a softness in the air, the kind that only follows chaos. You stretch your toes. The tiles below are warm from the day's heat, now releasing it bit by bit like a reluctant goodbye. A lizard scrambles across the edge of your vision, pauses, then disappears into the moon-dappled shadows. You wonder if it too feels like it survived something worth remembering. Mainstream fact: in many Persian towns, gardens and homes were designed with intentional stillness in mind, walled-off shaded water-centered. These spaces weren't just to survive the harsh climate. They were designed to invite contemplation. A home was not complete unless it had a corner that made you quieter. You let your head fall back against the wall, eyelids low. You can still hear faint music from a neighboring rooftop, someone plucking at a sitar, the notes slow and meandering, like they're following you into your dreams. You'd be forgiven for falling asleep right here. The night won't judge. You think of the children again, the ones who stared wide-eyed at the storm's fury, clinging to their mothers, then giggling when the sky cleared. The ones who will grow up and say, "Remember that night?" even if they were too small to remember much of anything. You think of the old man and his blanket, the sand in his beard, his silence. You wonder if he's awake right now, feeling the same peace. Quirky tidbit: in Yazd, an old superstition claimed that if you stayed silent for an hour after a storm, the spirits of the wind would whisper the answers to one of your deepest questions. No one ever admitted hearing anything, but many sat quiet, just in case. You let that idea linger. What would you ask? No, scratch that. What would you want to hear? A promise, a secret, a reason. The answer doesn't come, but the stillness does. Historians still argue whether Persian architecture's spiritual resonance was intentional or accidental, a byproduct of good acoustics and better water flow. But as you sit there, you realize intention doesn't matter. Effect does. The effect is this: a moment where you are not thinking of anything in particular, but you feel more complete than you did before. You rise, finally, not out of urgency, but because the bench has given all the comfort it had to offer. You step through the archway and cross the threshold back into the house. The air inside is cooler, now shaded and clean. The walls no longer carry the storm's thrum, only quiet. You unroll your sleeping mat, the same one you've used since childhood. The cotton smells faintly of cedar and thyme. You smooth the edges, adjust the folds, then lower yourself down with a deep, satisfied vikai. The lantern above flickers once, twice, then dims on its own. The house seems to understand the story is over. Your body grows heavier with every passing breath, as if the storm took with it all the tension in your limbs. The mat beneath you welcomes your weight, soft where it needs to be, firm where it counts. The night air drifts in through the window slats in slow, deliberate ribbons, cool, dry, and endlessly gentle. There is no sound now but your breath, and maybe a soft rustle from the fig tree outside. Even the cicadas seem to have fallen into slumber. You let your thoughts slow like water, finding its level. No more rushing, no more wind, just the memory of it. You imagine the sand now no longer flying, no longer swirling, but settled. Tiny grains lying still across rooftops, courtyards, and roads. Each one a story fragment, a moment carried far, and finally allowed to rest. You let your breath match that stillness. In, out, slow, even. You see, the desert doesn't rage forever. Even its fiercest storms must bow tonight. And now, with the wind gone and the stars steady, all that remains is the hush of a land catching its breath. So you catch yours too. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Let your eyes stay closed. Because this story, like all storms, has passed, and sleep is already here.